Hi everyone, Lauren Smallcomb from Flourish Therapy. I am a mind-body practitioner, and today I want to kind of give a recap and my thoughts on my brain retraining journey that ended, quote, ended about 3 years ago. So I did a podcast episode a few years ago, kind of giving an overview of my brain retraining journey towards the end of it. And people have been super interested in that. And so I thought, let me get on and share some more of my thoughts at this point on the journey, on what were the pieces that actually helped me to heal, to recover, to rebalance my very chronically dysregulated nervous system, what I had to do to get out of that state. And towards the end, I'll give my recommendation for who I think is the best candidates for brain retraining and really my raw, uncensored thoughts about brain retraining and who it can help and why it works. So first, I'll overview my story, and then I'll let you know kind of how I am now, where I'm at, what I do, what I don't do. So again, if you want to hear more details, listen to that episode. But I'll give a quick overview for anyone who hasn't. I developed autoimmune disease when I was 5. And prior to that, I had chronic ear infections and GI issues and wasn't a super strong kid. And then into my teen years, I started developing headaches. And as soon as I got married and got pregnant very, very young, which is a whole nother story, I began to have all kinds of chronic symptoms. Diagnosed with gastric reflux as a 20-year-old without any of the quote risk factors and all these other gut issues and pain issues and fatigue, basically chronic symptoms as a very young person who should have been in the prime of my life. So for my entire 20s, I had 2 biological babies, adopted a third baby, and then adopted a 12-year-old in my 20s, which tells you a lot about my state that I probably was in, and also gives some clues to the conditioning that I was living out of, doing all of that while also having a job and doing a lot of other projects and pursuits. So in those years, I was really, really sick in a progressive way. Like it wasn't the whole time, but as I was getting older, or as life was going on, I was kind of adding more symptoms to my backpack of chronic illness. And, at the time I didn't know it was chronic illness until there were so many. And I started finding some community really in the chronic illness world and in the holistic health world. I didn't find a lot of answers in the mainstream health world, just gave me a few meds and nothing was getting to the root. And so I really do value that functional medicine or other words, holistic health, natural health, they value the root more than mainstream medicine in my experience. Again, generalization. I will be giving lots of generalizations, so take that into context. However, when I started going into the natural health world, I began going down all of these bunny trails. And if you're listening and you've done this, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I would start reading articles and watching videos about different possible explanations for my symptoms. So, it would be like this vitamin deficiency or this mold problem that causes these symptoms, or this nutrient that's out of balance that you need to do this cleanse for, or this different microbe or parasite, bacteria, yeast overgrowth. It would be all of these different types of physiological problems, essentially imbalances, and then, the symptoms. Now, the problem with that is a lot of the symptoms that people who are, spoiler alert, have a very chronically dysregulated nervous system, they're going to have similar sets of symptoms and kind of general things. So something like fatigue or insomnia or pain and inflammation, those are very, very generalized symptoms, and they can be present in virtually every chronic illness. And so what happens a lot of the time is some of these imbalances really are there. And so people can treat them and actually feel better. But what happens often is these imbalances are found with these sets of symptoms and people relate to it. But really, you could have related to 10 other things with your specific set of symptoms. And kind of the proof is in the pudding. When they go to treat that imbalance or address it, they don't actually get better. And so something that I encourage folks to really be skeptical and ask that hard question of, is this actually making me feel better and consistently better? Is it sustainable? Is it not just better in the beginning? Because what can happen is the placebo effect, which is completely neuroscience. The brain moves towards what it believes is happening. It's not like you're willing it to happen. The brain is just moving towards that. So you actually can generate those feelings of wellness just from believing that you're going to feel well. And it's powerful and it's amazing that the body can do that. But over time, that placebo effect typically wears off and then the symptoms are back. And people are confused. And then they go down the next rabbit hole, and they keep trying to find the real problem. And this can be an exhausting process. I was in it for years of protocols after protocol, diets, avoidance of certain things, getting more of this, doing really difficult and hard to sustain foods and, ferments and different things to try to manipulate the inner environment to create health. And I got to a point where I was so tired of that process, so tired of the hope cycle of, oh, this might be what's wrong with me. And then doing something, putting my whole heart and soul into it and not feeling better. This is really hard emotionally on someone. And most of the folks who are doing these things already are very dysregulated, and either they're aware or they're not aware. And so it perpetuates this cycle of, I am broken and I have to urgently seek out what is wrong so that I can fix it, which often has a lot to do with what we felt in our childhood conditioning of our job. It's all on you to figure this out, to fix it, to be good, to be perfect, to make everything work. And it can take the emotional state and the physiological state to a much deeper place through being in this process. So that was a bit longer of an explanation than I intended, but hopefully it was helpful. What finally happened, and I'm actually going to be sharing more of my story soon, and I'm really excited about that. Also, pretty nervous, but I've kind of been vague with a lot of things, and that's been purposeful, and I'm getting ready to share more openly. So stay tuned for that. But essentially, in 2020, I was going through very, very hard traumatic loss and panic about certain circumstances that were happening around me. And I ended up spiraling even further down the chronic illness path. And so up until this point, I already had been treating my chronic illnesses for probably like 10 years with little or no success, varying levels of success depending on the symptom. And at this point, when I was kind of thrust into this very traumatic, scary place of loss and grief and confusion, I began to become even more sick. And this is really common with folks, that when it is that difficult, when the stressors are that high, your body can't cope. So my already kind of fragile state got worse. And I got down to being able to tolerate like 10 different foods and having hives every day from different foods, full body, terrifying hive process where my skin would like go on fire. And I felt like kind of a fight or flight response in my body, but it was happening physically in my skin. And then this dread that came over me. It's hard to explain, but this was happening often. I wasn't able to eat much. I was losing so much weight. And I also was incredibly fatigued. So you would look at the situation like, oh, chronic fatigue or, burnout. And those things are words that often don't tell the full story beneath the words or the diagnoses. So yes, if people would have seen me on the outside, that's what they would have seen. But what was happening internally that was causing it all was what needed to be addressed. So that year I got worse and worse and worse, and really scared Luke because he was just like holding me together, and holding our family together. And it was a very vulnerable time for our family. So anyways, we were stuck in America that whole time. This was during COVID, and we couldn't get back to Thailand, which was stressful, but not what the problem that we were going through was. But when we did get back in 2021, I was hopeful to settle back in, but we actually came home to a house that had gotten really moldy because it wasn't ventilated during that year well, like we thought it was. And that kind of pushed me even further into the panic state, because up until this point, I had figured out that didn't detoxify mold well and was not doing well because of the mold. I had assumed. And anyways, probably like a month into that process, I actually found out about something called DNRS, which is a brain retraining program. And I had heard about it before once. And actually, had I? No, I hadn't. I had just read about it actually coming back into quarantine in a Bangkok hotel. Actually, we had to be there for 2 weeks before we could come back because that was during COVID. It was crazy. And I'd read about it in a book called Toxic by a naturopath, a functional medicine doctor who does really good work. And he had mentioned that his patients who do this brain retraining tend to heal so much faster with the protocols he puts them on. And I thought that's really interesting. And I remembered my naturopath had mentioned that some people have that their bodies become very sensitized, and that pain receptors actually feel pain more strongly. He was basically describing central sensitization or limbic impairment or dysregulation. There's lots of different ways you could describe it, but he had told me that. And what I heard was, you are over exaggerating the pain that you're in. I didn't really comprehend it from a physiological standpoint, that actually the body can become sensitized. It's the opposite of desensitized. So you're becoming so heightened. Everything is felt at such a heightened level. And so symptoms are generated from that state. But he had told me about that and that there was a way to help it. And I didn't bite because it was actually offensive to me. So it's so funny how this happened. I'm actually like in a histamine group because I had developed really strong histamine intolerance at that point and was trying to do this antihistamine diet, like a very extreme one. I had done a light antihistamine diet for years, but then when I was having these hives and all this horrific brain fog, I had to go to like very low histamine and take all of these supplements to counteract it. And I'm in this group, and these people are cutting down to just a few, like, oh, you can't even do apples or blueberries anymore, like cutting everything out. And I just thought, like, something in me said, no, I don't want to keep doing this. This is ridiculous. You cannot sustain a life like this. And one of these days, a girl had posted, I should try to find it and thank her, because she had said in the group, I just ate a bag of Doritos and I feel fine. And I'm so confused. I haven't been able to eat like this for years, but I've been doing this brain retraining program and I'm able to eat again. And I just thought, what the heck is she talking about? But I also knew she had nothing to lose. Like, she wasn't selling anything. Why would she have just said that if it wasn't true? And so it was compelling to me and my skeptical self. And so I looked up the program she had mentioned, which was DNRS, and I read it voraciously for a couple days and I bought it. And I just decided I'm ready for something different. I have done mainstream medicine, I've done natural medicine, I've done acupuncture, chiropractic, diets, cleanses, protocols, genes, different devices, you name it, I probably have done it or done something similar to it with very little results. And I'm ready to do something different. And because I was so ready, that mindset was ripe, because I just didn't want to keep doing, like, all my eggs had been in the basket of like functional medicine for so long. And And I just was done because basically all that they could say to me now is, oh, keep working on your gut, keep working on your gut. And I remember saying to actually my naturopath, I'm like, when is my gut going to be better? I'm working on my gut like intensely for years and I'm still having all of these problems. So my story is getting long. I jumped into the program and did it and learned it all. And then basically you do it at home. You do the practices at home. And it was life transforming. Within a week, I wasn't waking up. I was waking up on my own. Luke wasn't coming to wake me up late into the morning. I just started waking up in a weekend. And it hadn't happened for years where my body naturally woke up. And we thought, well, that's weird and very obvious that apparently my body felt well rested and could get up. And I started to ride on my bike. And like 3 weeks in, I went rock climbing, which I had never done. And beforehand, I would have said, no way, that's going to push me way too far out. I can't do anything like that. And we went away for anniversary and I felt amazing. And all of these things started happening. My life, my little small world that I still pushed myself a lot in, but it started to open up bigger and bigger and bigger. And it felt phenomenal. Now, the process was really hard and I had to be very committed to it. And the mindset piece is probably the hardest. Like the practices were hard to do, but keeping a mindset of I am healing and these symptoms that I'm having right now, not allowing them to shift my state into such a dark place like they used to, that took so much effort. But as I was doing it, I was finding hope. I was actually experiencing hope in my body and what was happening and the shifts that were happening. I did this process of brain retraining for about 6 months hardcore and then another 6 months a bit modified. And so I ended it around 2022. And what I saw it do for me was I gained access to the felt sense of joy, of hope, of goodness, of fun, of a lack of fear, of calm that sometimes even felt boring because I was so used to being heightened. I didn't realize until I started doing this program that I was stuck in a state of sympathetic activation, or also known as fight, flight, freeze, for years. I don't know when I wasn't in that state. It's like high functioning. Sometimes you'll hear high functioning anxiety or high functioning depression. And that was kind of the state I was in. I would have never even said I was anxious, but what my physiological body was doing was staying very, very worked up inside. And that drove me to live and act from a state of urgency. And this was all related to the environments that I was formed in and the conditioning to have to fix, heal, and make a broken, quote, bad world better, and to keep myself also safe from it. So once I started to slowly shift out of being in that sympathetic activation state all the time into the state of ventral vagal, also known as safe and social, I felt all of these things with so much more depth than I had in the past and for longer periods of time. And I was also able to return to them more quickly after I had been, reactivated into that sympathetic activation state. And I really believe that this is why this program was so incredibly healing for me, because it gave me a very tangible way to change kind of my whole environment without just sitting at the beach 24/7 for a year. Not that that would even do it. I don't even think that that would necessarily do it, because you have to engage with your state to help shift it. It can't be acted upon you necessarily. So as I was experiencing more of these emotional shifts and these quote positive feel good neurotransmitters flowing into my system more, I was finding that my physical body was experiencing less symptoms. I was experiencing so many shifts on a physical level, less this, less that, less this. And of course, that would spur me on like crazy because here I was, this guinea pig for 10 years of my life, 15 almost at that point, of trying to figure out how to fix myself and being very acutely aware when things helped and didn't. And so I was seeing this help, which was extremely motivating for me to continue to lean into these practices and the mindset that I could heal and that really I wasn't broken, that things were just imbalanced in my system and that they could find a place of balance again. So I got to a place where I was feeling really good with how I felt in my body, my state, and I still had some symptoms, but I came into it with like 70 plus symptoms, and that number was way down. And the symptoms that I still had were either manageable or just things that weren't budging. And so the next couple of years, I kind of entered this new stage after the direct brain retraining stage, where I was learning to accept and even just tolerate the symptoms when they came up and not respond to them in fear. But when the fear was there, to be able to be with myself and be with that fear, maybe be with that frustration that that symptom came up. So the next couple of years, I felt like really gave me a different posture with the remaining symptoms. And so for me, the biggest shifts, because people are curious about specifics, and I totally get that, I was too. The biggest shifts for me was I began to be able to eat again. So I now eat anything I want, any type of food, any ethnicity food, any style of food. All the categories I used to not eat from, low FODMAP, low histamine, no gluten, no egg, no dairy, no some nuts, all of these things that I used to have to avoid and did very strictly, I am eating and was able to eat and was just shocked that I was able to open life up like that in such a way that until you're restricted, it's hard to recognize how that goes so much more beyond food. It's like to be able to delight in the thing that you do 3 to 4 times a day and that you do with people and you socialize with, when that's all stripped from you, it's really, really hard to accept. It's really depressing. It's really difficult and embarrassing and frustrating. And so bringing food back in changed everything for me. And I would choose to be able to have food over most other things because it was so difficult, especially being a foodie and just loving variety. It was so hard to do that with such restriction. The other thing that changed massively for me was my gut health. So up until this point, I had done so many gut protocols to kill off gut dysbiosis, quote, and bad bacteria and bad yeast and parasites and all of these different things. And then all of these healing nutrients for the gut lining. I could go on and on, but it doesn't matter. And at this point, when I started brain retraining, I was actually taking anti-parasitic medication monthly, which is insane and not healthy at all. But I would get such intense gut pain if I didn't. And so I assumed, I still don't really know, I assumed I just kept getting parasites. And yes, we live in Thailand, but people don't just constantly have parasites. That was very abnormal. And so I had to continue doing that, the monthly anti-parasite meds, because I was in so much pain. I had so much gut pain to where I couldn't even eat. So it was like the only thing that I found that helped, but I knew it wasn't good for me. So anyways, long story short, I had all of these gut symptoms constantly, and that was for 10 years straight. The parasite thing was more maybe in the last couple years before brain retraining of having to do that all the time. But I am to a point where I feel like I have a pretty normal gut now, which is crazy to say because for so long I was like, why can't my gut just be normal? SIBO, IBS, all different types of gut symptoms. And now my gut functions pretty normally. Once in a while it's off and I don't freak out because I know it's not a chronic thing. It's just life. But I'm able to tolerate food and enjoy it. And I'm just super thankful for that. The other thing that brain retraining helped me with tremendously was my chronic fatigue syndrome. I had so much fatigue. My whole day was centered around my energy output. I would sleep really long at night, probably like 9, 10 hours. And then I would take like a 2 to 3 hour nap in the afternoon. So what's that, like almost 15 hours of sleep I needed a day to survive, but not to not be tired. I was still super tired and super low energy, low output. Like I couldn't, my muscles were fatigued. It was really, really difficult to manage all of my responsibilities, job, kids, and different things. So that shifted so much during brain retraining and still has. I have a lot more energy. I know how to pace myself better now as well, like in a healthy way with boundaries, but not in the way I had to before, where it was like, oh, I can't do that because of this. And from a fear state of really restriction versus just, I'm a healthy human who needs balance. Everyone needs balance, and giving myself that permission to have balance. So fatigue was a massive thing that shifted as I did brain retraining. Body pain and tension became another one that started to shift a lot when my nervous system started to regulate. And that was so appreciated because I had chronic pain that was really significant in my head. I had chronic headaches. And so for the neck and shoulder pain and the kind of the body related muscle tension and pain to go away was so welcomed because it was one less thing for me to focus on. I also had a lot of kind of small random symptoms not related to any of these big areas that also reduced or eliminated, which was amazing. So my remaining symptom are my headaches still. They're here, and as you can see the smile on my face, I have a very different relationship with them, which sounds crazy because they've been here since about fourth grade, and there's story to that as well. But they have been kind of a big part of my neurology. I have, very strongly used neural pathways of this pain. And the brain retraining seemed to affect them a bit, but then it wasn't, it's hard to know when it doesn't go away or reduce over time consistently. You don't know if it was affecting them or if it was just you hoping it was. So I don't think that it really impacted it majorly. And I've toyed around so much just in this process of being mindful of how to care for myself from a state of support versus from a state of urgency and panic and brokenness. It's a very, very different posture. So at this point, my headaches tend to be very hormonally related, and I've had them for years, and it's something that I have a more accepting relationship of now. If someone told me, listen, there's this thing you can do that will take your headaches away for sure, I would 100% do it. No questions asked. I would love to be without any chronic pain. But for whatever reason, and I think it's because they're related to my hormones, which have not stopped fluctuating because I'm not postmenopausal and I still have those fluctuating cycles throughout the month. I still have this symptom, and sometimes it gets in my head because I think, you're not healed enough, or if you did more somatic practices and brain retraining, you could get rid of these headaches. And, I've gone back to doing different things throughout this process and not seeing any response, and just feeling torn and confused as a practitioner myself, because I do think that they are partially rooted in stress and dysregulation, and stress in the sense of like the long-term impact of stress on the body, not just like, oh, I had a stressful day, I have a headache. Obviously that happens here and there too, just like it would for anyone. However, my headaches, I can have a phenomenal day that was so nourishing, so supportive, so wonderful, and have a headache, or I can have a really stressful, really traumatic, difficult, awful day and not have one. And that's just the kind of the thing that keeps you guessing a lot when you have chronic pain, because there isn't necessarily a pattern. But what I do very much believe is the long-term impact of being in a dysregulated state can create some long-term problems. And I do believe in healing. And I don't think that it's impossible that this could heal, but I haven't experienced it. And I'm okay being honest about that. and learning the other valuable lessons and kind of gifts to be able to shift a posture. Because the reality is, no matter what healing modality you're in, ourselves and our clients and people need to learn to accept and live in difficult realities, whether that be interpersonally, whether that be the country that they live in, whether that be the economic situation that they're in, or the systemic oppression that they're under, or physical symptoms or mental health symptoms that even though they've worked hard to resolve and remedy those, they haven't fully shifted or they haven't shifted at all. And so I am grateful. I would still choose not to have them for sure, but I am grateful for the second set of skills and toolkit that you wouldn't have if you didn't have to do this. If my headaches had just healed that first 6 months, like so many of my other symptoms did, I would not have learned everything that I know about how to really accept something that feels unacceptable and really intolerable at times. So I do think that's a really important skill set, and I think people need it. And healers need it because not every situation can be resolved and remedied. So as we're getting towards the end of this episode, I want to share kind of more of my conceptualization of why it worked for me and the process of who it could work for and not work for. And I think that, of course, like everything else, hopefully you get this, that we are just full of nuance here. There's no one prescription for healing. Literally, there's not. Stop looking for it. There's lots of different options. Okay. And also, there are some principles that are important to attune to and to follow for yourself, for your clients, whoever's listening. Now, why I think that brain retraining worked so well for me was that year that I started to do that, I had already been doing a lot of trauma healing work prior to doing brain retraining. And for me, if I had entered into brain retraining without really exploring my grief and my loss and my trauma and my conditioning and understanding these systems that I was a part of that were making me sick, it would have absolutely felt like bypassing. It would have felt artificial, inauthentic. And honestly, I don't think it would have worked because of that. So because I had already been doing a lot of that work and really was grappling well with my story up to that point, I was very ready to now, okay, I've done this cleansing, cathartic, I'm seeing, I'm willing to name work. I was so ready to bring the other part of healing, which is I'm ready to nourish and to tap into my human right to have joy and goodness and to welcome back in all of those uniquely human gifts that I deserve in trauma and post-trauma. For me, it was balanced because of that. Now, some people do brain retraining modalities, or maybe even other types of healing. I'm just most familiar with this world, where they do, maybe like meditation or yoga. So they are like tapping into their body and their felt sense, and they're really able to experience a different state. However, the root things underneath that had led to their dysregulation, i.e. trauma and abuse, have not been explored. Or they might even still be part of that environment or that reality, that injustice. I think what happens oftentimes for folks like that who haven't done that work yet is that they can see symptoms shift and they can feel changes in their body, but eventually that stuff, man, it has a way of coming up through the concrete cracks and demanding to be seen, demanding attention and care. And so in saying that, I really feel like it's important for people to have a balanced healing process. And again, there's no prescription of exactly how to do this because some folks can do the brain retraining work, and that is like the only way they're able to then, once they're through that process, be able to enter into their trauma stories and able to sit with their grief in a real meaningful way. Like they needed first to be able to be opened up to goodness and beauty and joy and delight and be able to actually feel that connectivity to themselves, to others, to the world, for them to then be able to do kind of that second phase of deeper trauma healing, grief, trauma resolution, that phase. So I think it can happen both ways, where you do phase one and then phase two, or where you do phase two and then phase one. And I'm numbering them just for example's sake. There's not an actual one that needs to be first. I just would say if you go into some type of modality that can tend to be bypassing, like brain retraining or meditation, mindfulness, anything in that realm, I would say check in with your body. If your body feels ignored or dismissed, or not even your body, if your body's showing you that the deeper truths of your story are feeling really dismissed, then it might be better to either kind of weave them together at the same time, or pause the somatic brain retraining work and do more of the story, grief, trauma work, slowly and paced, not like barreling through it. But doing that might make it so you are then ready to do a modality like brain retraining. For me, it worked out that way, where I did a lot of the trauma healing work first. But I will say, after brain retraining, I also was in a really good place to do some other layers and levels of the trauma healing work that I was too dysregulated for at first. So now you might be like totally confused, and I'm sorry for that. It is just that nuanced. In an ideal world, people can do both. People with chronic symptoms are able to do both of those and kind of braid it together like a beautiful tapestry. And that's what I feel like I've been able to be the recipient of in my journey, and the active participant of. And I'm incredibly grateful for that, because I don't feel like I bypassed anything. And yet I also wasn't just sitting in the misery of my grief and pain only. Because this is the problem. This is one of our critiques of the trauma healing world, is people are made for more than just their pain. Got me kind of emotional. We so tend to swing the pendulum the opposite way for everything when we realize something true. It's just a tendency we have. So it's like, oh, we realize, oh my gosh, all of these emotions not felt, all of these truth not seen. We're keeping ourselves from reality, and we're not letting ourselves be fully human. And so then we swing that pendulum to like just there, but not realizing that the bypassing world had something, right? That we also do need joy, and we need a connection to peace and to safety and to delight and to wonder and to rose-colored glasses even at times. And so somewhere in the middle of that terrible pendulum is both, allowing us to go on and off with our deep grief pain work, which is 1,000% crucial. If I had not done that and continue to do that with my story, I would not be a full human. It has saved my life. Honest to God, the path, the process, the relationship with grief has made it so that I can live, and I can live a full life. So if you keep people from that, it's like the door actually can't be opened to genuine joy. They're so deeply interconnected, inextricably connected. They are made for each other. The beauty and joy and the grief, pain, and suffering, being able to feel all of them, engage with all of them is what we're made to do. And so ideally, that is the process, whatever modalities people are using, that they have both of those on their plate during their healing and their quote post-healing, because life is a journey of healing and a journey of becoming and unbecoming. And the reality is we need every single part of our humanity on board with that process. Sometimes it just looks like a different time for a different thing. And knowing that and having the attunement and the awareness of what is best at that time, you may need help deciding what's best for you, and it's not black and white. Something that we focus on a lot at Flourish Therapy is sustainable nervous system regulation. And this is why we have to be aware of a full picture of us when it comes to our healing and our well-being. If we're just doing breathing practices or yoga practices, meditation, mindfulness, activity, exercise to help our bodies regulate, that's part of the equation. We can't just do that though, because if you kind of open up and look in more deeply, peer beyond the surface level, oh, I'm dysregulated. It's important to see beyond that into the fuller picture and timeline of our story in context within which we are facing chronic dysregulation. And so for us as a practice, this is of utmost importance. And we feel like people are being disadvantaged if they're just taught the surface level. If they're just taught the surface level, do these things, and then you can shift your state and feel better up here. But there's deep wells of truth that need to be mined to find out why your body is in a state of constant dysregulation. And let me tell you, that could be many, many different explanations. There's so many things it could be. For me, I was in a state of constant sympathetic activation because of my childhood conditioning related to my family of origin and also to my religious environment. I felt like I had to be good and make things good and do that with fervor and zeal and urgency. And because that was so important to me and the people in my life were so important to me, I did that with abandon, literally abandoning my body and my own needs. And this created years and years and decades, really, of chronic activation, being stuck in this sympathetic activation and not even knowing. I was so disconnected from myself and so disembodied. I didn't even know that I was so dysregulated. And it was also fueling all of my decisions and all of my actions and conversations and the way I did relationship and the way that I saw world issues. Everything was coming from that place. You've probably heard story follows state. The story that I interpreted everything through was from the state that my body was in. It's important and wise to do this deeper dive work with a really close friend who's also done this in their story, with a mentor, with a therapist, with a coach, to be able to understand what else is here. I really want to peer beneath the conscious and get into the subconscious and understand with more clarity what is driving my symptoms, because the body doesn't typically just malfunction. It's not even really malfunctioning. It's appropriate functioning. If it's not safe, and if that imbalance is there, the body's trying to compensate and trying to keep you safe. If it's brought this activation or shutdown or chronic symptoms from that, the body has a method and a means. Even if it doesn't make sense, it's trying to protect you and trying to wake you up to the realities and trying to show you with a language that the only language that it has, right, which is symptoms. And so a lot of the times we see conditioning, family, cultural, religious conditioning that people aren't yet aware of that may be driving their chronic dysregulation and symptoms. It can also be unaware and undiagnosed neurodivergence, because the world is created for neurotypicals. And when you are neurodivergent, you have inevitable trauma from not fitting and from having to belong, which is its own conditioning. Okay, just like the conditioning I explained for myself. Neurodivergent people are also conditioned to mask and to deny their needs and their lived experience and felt sense for the neurotypical people around them and the neurotypical expectations of society that are often unspoken. A third big area would be the current environment. So not just the past environment, but the current environment you're in, whether that be a toxic, abusive relationship with a partner, with parents, with an adult child, with siblings, with your coworkers, any close relationship that either impacts you a lot time-wise or emotion-wise because of how valuable that relationship is to you. Even if it's a difficult one, if it's an important relationship, it still has a massive impact on your body and mind. It can also be the environment of a high control religious group or organization. Even if you're not experiencing spiritual or organizational abuse within that group, which is possibly unlikely because it's very common, the beliefs, the doctrines, the tenets, the theology of that group may itself be restrictive, oppressive, and controlling. And that inevitably affects our bodies. So there's a few examples, and there are so many others that you could pull from. But I would invite you to consider looking at the roots to try and understand, what is this dysregulation coming from? It's really important to do sustainable healing work versus just quick fixes and like Band-Aid work. Sometimes that's needed in the beginning to keep you able to go forward so that you can do that deeper necessary work to make your healing and your thriving sustainable. But again, those areas of your childhood conditioning, which has shaped your neurological system, your brain, your body towards a certain end, and it's affecting you now. It's not in the past, it's current, it's present, it's alive. Also looking at some specifics about you and how you work. Things like being a neurodivergent person, possibly even being HSP or being an empath, those will all impact what you have done to survive in this world and point out potential suppression that you have had to do and masking to make you fit and belong, but that is making you unwell. This could be many different categories, even just someone not fitting in their family because they're so different and what that's done to them. And then the other category would be the environment that you're currently presently in and how that's impacting you. And thinking even beyond the actual environment like place, but the tenets and the belief system of that environment, how your brain is engaging with them and how those are affecting your need as a human to be autonomous, to be embodied and authentic. Really exploring these can bring so much insight and depth of understanding of why your body even got into the place of being chronically dysregulated and all that has come from that. We love to help people connect those dots in a way that is very client-led, in a way that they are tapping into their own intuition to see and feel into how these different elements have affected them and where that shows up in their life. So if you are looking for help like that, please reach out and we will discuss different options with you. So all that to say, that is some of my thoughts on my brain retraining journey and the modality of brain retraining. It has been such an incredible gift to my life, and it's hard to articulate. So please, if this has interested you, please listen to the other episode, because I just find it hard to explain how amazing it is to feel like you've gotten your life back. And so many things have opened up for me and become just another level of like my own healing and my own journey because I was able to do this that I just don't know if I would have had access to without being in a better place. You know, chronic illness is a thief. It steals so much potential and opportunities and even ability to, you know, have a clear mind and explore different parts of your story. That we take that for granted when we're well. But when you're sick, you are just surviving. And that was actually something else I wanted to say of who I think brain retraining is really good for. I recommend brain retraining if the person is moderately to severely chronically ill. If you are mildly chronically ill, maybe just say have a few conditions that aren't very overwhelming, that don't really consume your day-to-day life. Brain retraining is a big commitment, and it's something you want to immerse your whole self into. And if you're not really unwell, I don't think, not that it wouldn't help, it would definitely help, but I don't think it would necessarily be worth the mental energy you need to kind of commit that time of your life to that. And that's really what I see brain retraining be the most helpful for, is when someone can say, these 6 months of my life, I am going to invest, I'm going to jump all in. And I'm going to make this about me. I'm going to cut off anything else in my life that I don't need to do. I'm going to delegate my, things to other people, my partner or my friends. They're all going to know what I'm doing so that they can be supportive too. And I'm going to commit to every day waking up and leaning into this process. Even if it's a really crappy day, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to stop. And that's why I would say it makes the most sense to do that. And that's why I would say it makes the most sense to do that if you are moderately to severely chronically ill. That's who I recommend it for. And those are the people who, if they're able to stick with it, which I understand some people don't have the support systems to even be able to. But if they're able to, this is going to really impact those people's lives, because they feel so bad that the small shifts that start to happen at first are going to be so welcomed and so appreciated. For people who aren't really unwell, but maybe they're starting to see their body show some things, maybe they have some knee pain or some eczema, or they're starting to have some insomnia, little things creeping up and bothering them, but not, consuming them. I would say that's a really good time to get into your body also in any kind of way. A big part of brain retraining is visualizations, and those can be really powerful to create the brain, to create those positive feel-good neurotransmitters. So you can do something like visualizations or meditation or different somatic practices like breathing or different positions, movement positions. You can look up vagus nerve exercises. I would start to get into your body and create some type of place for the stress cycles that you face day in and day out to complete through movement and breath work, so that your body is able to access safety and regulation more readily. And those little practices can become actually really, like, it does not need to take long. That's all that Luke and I do now, is small practices. And they can really get you back to a place of empowerment and safety pretty quickly. So I would recommend any body-based practice for people to start doing who aren't moderately to severely chronically ill, but are noticing that their body has a lot to say. And of course, then there's the other, like, more holistic perspective on the body. Like, are you eating balanced meals? Are you drinking enough water? Are there substances involved? And to what extent are those substances involved? Are you getting sleep? Those are your basic needs that affect every system and need to be in check as well. So it might be more of something like that. You may not be sleeping because you're drinking, 6 cups of coffee in the day, and that's what's really needed. But maybe you're drinking all that coffee because you're so tired and you can't keep up. And that's where the body-based practice could help give you more agency and empowerment, and actually physiologically help that stress cycle complete as you're moving your body or doing breath work. So there's so many options, and I'm just kind of throwing out all different ideas to you. But hopefully, in listening to this, you kind of have an idea of a direction you want to look into further for yourself and your own situation. Thank you so much for listening to this. It means a lot. Thank you for being interested. Thank you for being kind and gracious and hearing my story and holding it with gentleness, hopefully. And I just wish you all the best as you are pursuing healing and wholeness in your own life. Are you in a relationship and navigating the complexities of neurodivergence? Join Luke, a neurodivergent mental health practitioner, for the Neurodiverse Relationship Processing Group, a safe, welcoming space where you and your partner can explore your unique needs through the lens of your neurotypes. Each week, dive into important topics like conflicting perspectives, emotional connection, burnout, intimacy, and more, all aimed at creating better understanding and communication. No official diagnosis is required. If neurodivergence resonates with you or your partner, you're welcome to join. Take the first step towards deeper connection, peace, and support. This brand new group offering is limited to just 4 couples, so head to our site at flourishtherapy.co to apply today.